In this video, I'll be talking about the National War Labor Board and the Freedman Bureau. So the big question here is, of the two, which one benefited black rights the most? To answer this, we have to know what they are. The Freedmen's Bureau was enacted by Congress to aid in the Reconstruction of the South. It was created in 1865 in the post-Civil War era. Afterwards, we have the National War Labor Union, which existed twice, once in 1918 through 1919, again in 1942 through 1945. They were created to maintain constant wartime production by the President, Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt, respectively. So, first with the Freedmen's Bureau. In post-Civil War-torn South, there were 4 million jobless ex-slaves and large plots of abandoned land. The Freedmen's Bureau provided food, housing, medical aid, established schools, and much more for the people who needed it. There was a lot of opposition to the Freedmen's Bureau as well. Reconstruction was a difficult time for our nation. With 4 million ex-slaves entering the workforce, there wasn't enough jobs for everyone. There were also no government policies in place to deal with such a large influx of refugees. On the government side, it's also difficult to administer help on such a large level. Continuing with the opposition, President Johnson vetoed the bill to continue the service. He claimed it was a tax burden to working citizens, it interfered with states' rights, and the government gave a racial preference over whites. There was also a lot of disagreement on government intervention. No one knew how much should be put into the program or how long the program should operate. At this time, there was also a lot of KKK and anti-black opposition to the freed slaves gaining citizenship. During this time, the program was underfunded and understaffed. At the peak, there were only 900 agents working with the group, most of which being veterans from the Civil War who didn't have jobs. These people faced constant ridicule and violence for those who did not agree with their practice. Through all this, they still managed to benefit the South. They gave black marriage rights, they educated roughly 200,000 ex-slaves, they fed millions, and helped to reunite families with government help. Now over to the National War Labor Board. This group was active twice. Once in 1918 through 1919 during the First World War, it was created under President Woodrow Wilson. Again in 1942 through 1945 during the Second World War, Franklin Delano Roosevelt restarted the program. So, the main idea behind this program was that during both World Wars, the U.S. was a major supplier of weapons and supplies. We needed large-scale military mobilization, which required constant factory operation to maintain the amount of guns, bullets, explosives, and anything else we need for war. During this time, many workers also went on strike to protest low wages and tough working conditions. The NWLB was created to set regulations to satisfy workers and maintain constant factory operation. So the goals were accomplished by having the group led by various people. There were political leaders, business leaders, and labor leaders, each representing their side of the argument, providing so that each decision benefited everyone as much as possible. The NWLB was also tasked with providing labor policy regulations, preventing a pause in production, and eventually expanded to control wages and prices. The main thing that would pause production would be workers going on strike. During this time, it was made illegal to go on strike because it would be against the government. So the main accomplishment of this group was that it eliminated the pay gap between genders and between race. When the men were out at war, the factories needed more and more workers. With less and less men to fuel them, African Americans and women stepped in to fill the much-needed jobs. So, back to the question of who was more significant. The Freedmen's Bureau rebuilt half a nation, faced heavy hardships, and started to create equal opportunities between blacks and whites. At the same time, the NWLB equaled out pay, united the nation, and was essential to the war effort. There are many arguments that can be made, one of which being that the Freedmen's Bureau focused on more areas of society. They educated blacks, fed the poor, faced several hardships while doing so, but the NWLB was necessary to gain the large working force for large war mobilization, and blacks would have slowly assimilated even without this, just as everyone would have slowly learned German if we lost either of the wars. Argument 2, saying the Freedmen's Bureau failed because of how progressive of an idea it was. People just weren't ready for change. We did go to war, there was heavy KKK opposition, and Southerners weren't too happy about losing. But looking at that, the Freedmen's Bureau still did fail. They tried hard, but they weren't able to accomplish their goal to the fullest extent like the NWLB. So, my general point being that the NWLB was a more successful group. They managed to pull together the nation, they helped in a time of need, and they served their purpose fully. All in all, it benefited black rights the most by leveling the wage gap, creating a more equal opportunities. Thank you for watching.